What a game. A second crushing loss in a row for the Fever and a needed win for a Storm team that has finals aspirations and wanted to avoid another L after getting off to a 1-3 start. I thought this game would be tough. A lot was made of the Nika Mule Caitlin Clark matchup, but I wasn't confident that Nika would play much. That assignment takes a lot of energy and conditioning, and Nika had missed every single regular season game with her visa issue, so I didn't think Noelle Quinn would throw her into that fire unless necessary. And it also wasn't clear whether or not Neko Gumake would be back in the lineup. She had missed some time with the ankle injury, and so if Neko was out, I thought Seattle would lose some consistent scoring, which has been a problem for them. But even more importantly, lose a paint presence, and that might be the thing to give Aaliyah Boston that final spark to get going this season and have a breakout game. Since Seattle's two other paint defenders, Ezzie McGregor and Mercedes Russell, would need to dedicate themselves to both Boston and Smith instead of really focusing on one. So I was a nervous Storm fan watching this game, and it was a close game. The Storm led for most of the game and felt dominant for the entire first half, but the score was never really reflecting that. Indiana stayed attached throughout, so it's very competitive even when it didn't feel like it was. And so Indiana deserves credit for that, considering the talent mismatch and the road environment. Seattle can get pretty wild. They said that this game was the most ever to see a Seattle Storm home game, and Seattle is a very loyal and strong fan base. So that's impressive. That's saying a lot. And they have that new stadium that was built a couple years ago, and so good to see them making use of that. For pretty much the entire first half, Christy Wallace was playing point guard instead of Caitlin. Christy would bring the ball up, and then they would maybe get the ball to Caitlin off a screen or something like that, and then kind of conduct the offense. But the offense was running through Christy Wallace, and my theory on that is that Christy Sides thought about the guard matchup of Jewel, Skylar Diggins-Smith, Jordan Horston, Nika Mule, and all four of those guards for Seattle are more athletic than Caitlin. And I think she maybe anticipated some issues with Caitlin getting separation to get her shot off, or even issues with handles being guarded that tightly. Because Skylar Diggins-Smith really did stick to her this game. And I think she wanted to get Caitlin off ball to sort of mitigate some of that. This is the same offensive scheme she'd used in some earlier games this season, and unfortunately really failed. All of Caitlin's three-point shots in the first, section of the game were off of screens, and she missed all of them. Her only points were off layups when Seattle really wasn't paying attention in the paint. She was able to just kind of slip through. One was off like an inbound play. So I know Christy Sides has received a lot of criticism for how she's used Clark, and I'll actually make a video digging into that deeper. But she had changed things up over the last two games, putting Caitlin at true PG, but then moving her back to shooting guard for this game really backfired. She hasn't been able to play make as well because most of her angles are bad. She gets trapped in the corner. A few of the passes have been like hockey assist opportunities instead of direct assists. If you don't know what hockey assist is, it basically just means it's like you make the pass that leads to the assist instead of getting the actual assist yourself. So by the second half, Caitlin was back to playing the one, and she started getting a better rhythm and score. And halfway into the third, she finally hit a three off a step back, and not only her fortunes, but the fortunes of the entire team offensively improved from there. So I guess, the experiment that Christy Sides is trying to do, but over the data we have from the last 5 games, it does seem like the best way to do this is just to keep the ball in, your best offensive players' hands. All right, let's talk about Aaliyah Boston. Aaliyah Boston had a bad first half. She got 2 quick fouls. It was literally like 13 seconds that it took her to get, 2 fouls. And that brought her up to her third. Christy Sides sat her, and she didn't return to the game until the third quarter. So starting the third quarter back in the game, after having to sit due to foul trouble and just poor play in general, she gets blocked by Ezzie McGregor under the basket on the first play of the third quarter. Now, let me preface this and say, getting blocked by Ezzie McGregor is not a bad thing. That doesn't say anything about, someone's play. Ezzie is an incredible shot. She's one of the best rim protectors that we have in the game, right? So that in and of itself is not a bad thing. But it's the reason and the way in which she gets blocked. If you watch the NBA, Aaliyah Boston reminds me a lot of Kyle Anderson. Kyle Anderson is a bench player, and he's notorious for his incredibly long shooting motion. It takes him forever to put up a shot. So he's very easy to defend if you want to defend him, because by the time it takes him to get into his shooting motion, you can already, you can cross the court and get there to block that shot. That is how Boston is in the paint. She does not have the elite athleticism to elevate, like a Fag Benley, on her team. So she absolutely needs to be quick and decisive with her post moves. And she takes forever to rise up, so she allows herself to be stripped. How many times have you seen her, get a jump ball because she's holding the ball down low and, the defender grabs onto it, or they strip her, or they block it, or, so Jordan Horston, a guard who is 3 inches shorter than her and weighs a lot less, was able to block 2 of her shots and help defense throughout this game because Aaliyah just took forever to try to bring the ball up and shoot. So in the first quarter, another, testament to how slow she's playing, Nalissa Smith missed a jumper and the ball ricocheted right in Boston's direction, and it looked like she was moving in molasses trying to recover it, and it ended up being a turnover because she just didn't get to the ball in time, and it was completely doable. The Indiana Fever are not some elite team being held back by Aaliyah Boston. I want to make that clear, but their floor would be so much higher than what it is if Boston was playing even close to replacement level. Right now, she's skating by on her resume from last year and just, name recognition and what she did in college. But outside of that context, this season, she's been an anchor around this team's neck. Multiple of these losses could have been either wins or at least competitive if she was giving them what she's supposed to. This game could have been a win. We're talking about a game that was decided by one possession. This could have been a win. The last game to the Connecticut Sun, also a nail biter, could have been a win if she's giving them what she's supposed to. And even in the losses, they would have had more confidence because the games would have been more competitive. She is absolutely tanking this team. In the third quarter, obviously Seattle is entering the game with the plan to stretch their lead, and Aaliyah is just a traffic cone in the paint, partially because she already has 3 fouls, so she has to be a little careful. But also she's just not being effective, and she's not able to be fast enough to keep up with perimeter players without fouling. So Skylar Diggins-Smith goes right past her for an easy layup, and that you just can't have it. So during the entire period where the Fever were battling back and trying to make it a game, Christy Sides had her on the bench, and well into the fourth, she had only played 10 minutes. So she's just been a net negative for this team, and it's incredibly frustrating. There was a news story earlier this week about how Aaliyah Boston deleted her social media apps because of all the criticism she received, and I have no problem with that. That's very common for athletes to do, especially when they're going into the playoffs or something like that. Rudy Gobert in the NBA did something similar. Who wants to see and hear that, right? No matter how true, we all have disappointing times. You know what you're doing wrong for the most part. You don't necessarily need to see that repeated over and over. But what I don't respect is the response from fans who say that people are being too mean or too cruel. Part of women being treated equally as professional athletes and getting the respect of professional athletes is getting the spotlight that the men get. Aaliyah Boston hasn't even faced 1% of the criticism and vitriol that an equivalent NBA star receives. There aren't talking heads chatting women's basketball all day, downing her. Twitter isn't making elaborate memes of her every game. Right now, Jason Tatum is being dragged on sports radio and national TV shows for being a choker when he won a game with 36 points in overtime. You develop mental toughness. She needs to drown out the noise and do whatever she needs to do to get better for her team, but I'm not with calling out fans and dismissing criticism as too much. That's soft. She has to be better than that. All right, now let's talk about Seattle Stars. Seattle had the 2 best players on the floor this game by a mile, Nneka Ogwumike and Jewel Lloyd. Nneka is just insane. It is truly a treat to have Nneka on a team that I root for because it's just way different from, than watching from afar. Just seeing how she plays, paying attention to every single detail. I don't know if it's possible to create a better player for any team. She just fits into any team because she does everything. She had a corner 3 to start the game. She made transition layups with crazy handles. She had an ISO fadeaway jumper. She had multiple nice jumpers. She posted up Aaliyah Boston. She posted up Fag Benley. She was playing free safety, deflecting passes. Just relentless and versatile. And at 33, I was a little worried when, found out she was coming to Storm. I was a little worried that, maybe her prime is over and, we're going to get a player who's, still good, but not herself. And she's completely dismissing that. I mean, she's showing she's still in her prime. Through the first few games that she played with Seattle, she was the MVP, and they sorely missed her in that last game against Liberty. She immediately made herself felt in this game. She never let up. With 3 minutes left in the game, she switched on to Kelsey Mitchell, who's not just the guard, but the fastest player on the Fever. And not only did she keep up with her, but she forced her into a turnover under the basket, and that was a huge play. So just no words for how great of a player Nneka is. She's just a Swiss Army knife, and Seattle is very lucky to have landed her in the offseason. Jewell Loyd got out of her offensive slump from last game and started this game off firing. She had over 20 in the first half, just insane. A monster performance. Jump shots, posting up, and it wasn't just on one end. I mean, when she wants to, Jewell can be a great perimeter defender, and she showed it this game. So much hustle. She drew us a really significant charge late in the game on Benley. When she's like this, she reminds me of Jaylen Brown from the Celtics. Just two-way, high level, very aggressive, very physical, finishing through contact, just an electric player to watch when she's on. And I want to quickly go through notes on the others. Skylar Diggins-Smith, just not effective as a scorer still. I know part of that is her getting back. Noelle Quinn made a point to mention, that she is coming off of maternity leave. That's all true. But also Skylar Diggins-Smith is not, she's not the best scorer to begin with. So some of this I anticipated when she came to the Storm. She's just not that, consistent scorer. What is, I guess, a little worrying is that she's getting to the basket and just not hitting any of the easy ones, any of the layups, and so that's a little concerning. But hopefully, as this first month goes on, she gets in a better rhythm and gets her touch back. Her facilitation's been fine, but she only had 2 points going to the fourth, and so it's just hard to deal with that. She was 1-9 even with open looks, since so much attention on other players. And Caitlin Clark was her defender. Caitlin was the weakest defender on the team, and so for most of the time. And so actually in the fourth, Caitlin missed her assignment and left Skylar wide open at one point, and she still missed the shot. So she has to be better there, because no matter how good as you are as a facilitator, we need something. You need something from your point guard. Even Sue Bird is, Sue Bird comparisons are rare air, but even in her last 40-something-year-old season with the Storm, Sue was good for three threes a game. She'd get you a nice, get you into 10 points, 9 points, something like that. You need something from your point guard. And right now, on a scoring level, Skylar Diggins-Smith isn't getting that. And so they're going to need that in order to reach the levels that they want to reach. In the second quarter, Lexi Hull gave the Fever their first non-paint points with a corner three. I'm sure that was extra nice for her because she actually grew up in Washington State. So I'm a really big fan of Lexi's. I liked her in college. She came out of Stanford. Last year, the Fever took her in the first round, and she played well her rookie year. But she's been pushed down the depth chart this year, and she's still finding her way. But at her best, she's a really good 3-and-D bench player, and I think once she finds her rhythm, she'll be able to really help this Fever team. But she did make two big mistakes in the fourth quarter. She missed an easy layup that would have cut into the Storm's momentum late in the fourth when they were rallying back. And then she committed a costly foul on Jewell Loyd on a three-pointer. And Jewell made all 3 points, all 3 free throw shots. So that was pretty rough. NaLyssa Smith has been Indy's best player. She's strong in the paint, jumping passing lanes, deflecting balls, running after rebounds. She was able to force that key turnover on the inbound pass late in the game. So just really great game for NaLyssa Smith. Unfortunately, she didn't get to cap it with the win. Kelsey Mitchell heated up in the second half. First half was kind of slow for her. On a really big play, she split Seattle's 2 bigs for a layup with 14 seconds left to put the Fever within 2. There was a little confusion as to whether or not there was a foul on that, but ultimately there wasn't. So, but it still brought the Fever really close and, gave them what they needed to even be in the game and make that end of that game as chaotic and fun and hopeful as it was. Benley continues to make an impact off the bench. She was kept on the floor deep into the fourth despite having 5 fouls, and Chrissy Sides left her in the game until she fouled out. You can contrast that with, Aaliyah Boston. She took her out with 3 fouls. So it just shows you how much this team values Benley and what she's earned so far just in 4 or 5 games. Nika Mule did enter the game to a standing ovation with 2.5 left in the third, and Caitlin immediately hit a James Harden-esque step back three in her face to tie the game at 54, and that actually started a fever run to take the lead. And so Nika was pulled not too long after. That was a little ironic considering the talk around the game, but in general, I thought Nika did a pretty good job facilitating. She looked like she was gelling with the team, looked like they all had good chemistry. But she did miss her shot, so there was no scoring in that limited time. I didn't expect too much from this. Like I said, she hasn't played any regular season games. She was thrown into what was a very close, emotional game. So I think she did pretty well. There's not really much to say there. Sammy Whitcomb started this game very cold from three, that's usually her strength. Sammy Whitcomb is a shooter, but she heated up in the fourth and she made some huge shots. Kaylin drew a foul on her on a three-pointer, but Whitcomb eventually neutralized that with a block on another Clark three. It was a close non-call since she did grace Clark's hand, but they deemed it marginal contact. But, big impact in the fourth for Sammy Whitcomb. I'm really impressed by Jordan Horston this year. She was forced to fill big shoes last year as a rookie, having to replace Sue Bird as the Storm's point guard. And I wondered how she adjusts this year to not having the ball in her hands once Skylar Diggins-Smith joined the team. I was afraid she'd try to do too much, but she has been the consummate role player, and she's just elite in her role. She has a great feel for the game, knowing when to take the shot versus when to pass. There was a time with 1 minute left, NECA passed her the ball in the corner where she had a decent look for a three, but she immediately sent a missile pass to Ezzie Magbagor, who was open under the basket. Just unselfish, incredible vision and judgment. She has a great motor all game, chasing down loose balls. She's been excellent using her athleticism to impact as a weak side defender in the paint. Just an A-plus grade from me for her to start this season. So let's talk about the end of this game. The end of this game was crazy. There was a botched inbound pass by Seattle that led to a turnover off of Neko Ogwumike, and that gave Indy the ball down one with 10.3 seconds left. I know if there are any Indiana Pacers fans who were watching the Indiana Fever game, they probably felt like this is a good sign because earlier in the week, the NBA Eastern Conference Game 1, Indy was on the wrong side of that sort of call, and it ended up in the Boston Celtics winning in overtime. So I think once Indy saw that, they were like, oh, we're on the right side of this turnover, maybe we'll win this game. But, it's all for nothing because there was bad execution by Indy on the second inbound. Clark couldn't handle the second inbound pass. She gets trapped. She tries to get the ball out to the nearest person to her, who is Aaliyah Boston. Aaliyah Boston immediately gets tied up for a jump ball. Surprise. Then on the jump, Boston wins the tip, but she tips it directly to Neko Ogwumike, and that effectively ends the game. Seattle having possession and the lead with 2.6 seconds left. Really, really tough loss for the Fever. Their next game is against their easiest opponent yet in the Los Angeles Sparks. So we'll see if they can get their first win there. It won't be a gimme, though. I mean, the Sparks, have more. They at least have a win now. And, again, they haven't played the same level of competition that the Fever have had. The Fever have had a really brutal schedule, but, none of these games are necessarily cakewalks. The Sparks will have some confidence after the game that they had. And, they'll also, nobody wants to be the team to give the Fever their first win. So, for the Storm, cool win. They needed this one. And hopefully this will be the game to get them back on track and help them gel as a unit. If you enjoyed this video, please like it and subscribe to the channel. I share reactions to WNBA games, and I also do in-depth videos on big topics in the league throughout the year. I did a breakdown on the Seattle Storm and their big off-season acquisitions, actually, and their goals for the season. So go watch that if you haven't already, and check out all the other videos on my channel. Thanks for sticking around to this recap, and we'll talk later.